Before we begin our service, I would ask those of you with the ribbons, so from up here, over here, to please rise up. I can see you from here. The ribbons that you're wearing are really a remnant of an ancient custom. In biblical times and thereafter, when someone died in the Jewish community, the mourners would tear their clothing and they will wear the torn clothing for 30 days to sign their mourning, so people would treat them in a special way. At the end of the 30 days, because people didn't have any amount of clothing we do, they will have to sew the clothing back together so they can wear it again, and never in such a way that it will not be worn. The idea, which is so difficult to feel right now, is that we heal, but the tear within us becomes a part of it, and we become. You'll notice your uncle is wearing it on the opposite side. If I get it right, then you are wearing it. Only children wear it over the heart. Everyone else wears it on the opposite side. And if you repeat after me in Hebrew and English, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. Blessed are you, O Lord our God.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God.
Ruler of the universe, Judge of truth, Judge of truth. Amen. Out of the depths we call unto thee, O God. In thy hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Thy loving kindness is never withdrawn from us, but ever abides with us in death as in life. In thy wisdom thou hast laid upon us this heavy burden. Mayest thou also in thy mercy give us the strength to bear it. Guide and sustain us lest we stray from thy paths. Give us that strength of faith which shall keep us from murmuring against the justice of thy dispensation, even when thou dost afflict us. Grant us, we pray thee, the understanding which shall enable us to recognize that the hand that woundeth is the hand that bindeth up again. Thou art the life of all life. In this hour of death, in this hour of grief, let us listen to the voice of the psalmist as he brings us a message of God's nearness, of our fellowship with God in light and in darkness, in joy and in sorrow, in life and in death. Ese einai el heharim ayin yavo Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamut raglecha al yanum shamrecha. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shamer Yisrael. Adonai shamrecha, Adonai tzilach ad yad yaminecha. Yamam Hashemus lo yakeka v'yirech balayla. Adonai yishmarecha mikol ra yishmar et nafshecha. Adonai yishmar tzeitach avoecha me'ata v'ad olam. I will lift up mine eyes unto the mountains, from whence shall my help come? My help cometh from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel doth neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall keep thee from all evil. He shall keep thy soul. The Lord shall guard thy going out and thy coming in, from this time forth and forevermore. Adonai ma Adam v'tadiehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. Adam lehevel dema yamav ketzel over. Baboka yatzitz v'chalaf le'erv malel v'yavesh. Tashev enosh adaka. V'tomer shuv v'nei Lo hachme skido zot yavinu li'acharitam. Ki lo v'moto yikacha kol lo yered acharav kevodo. Poda Adonai nefesh avadav. V'lo yishmu kol hachosim bo. O Lord, what is man that thou takest knowledge of him, or the Son of Man that makest account of him? Man is like unto vanity. His days as a shadow that passeth away. In the morning he flourisheth and groweth up. In the evening he is cut down and withereth. Thou turnest man to contrition and sayest, Return ye children of men. O that they were wise, that they would consider their latter end. For when man dieth, he shall carry nothing away. His glory shall not descend after him. But the Lord redeemeth the souls of his servants, and none of them that trust in God shall be forsaken. Death has summoned our beloved Joel Braverman. Our souls cry out unto thee, O Lord, what is man? Is he the creature of dust, whose destiny it is but to return to the dust from which he came? The ancient sage has taught us the spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord. Not even the darkness of death can extinguish God's light, which he has kindled in the sanctuary of our souls. Therefore, God, we thank thee in this solemn hour for that which was deathless in the life of our cherished Joel Braverman, and which is now revealed to us in all its beauty, for his love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship which we shared along life's path and which still continues through the tenderness of memory. O Lord, we thank thee in this solemn hour for that which was deathless in the life of Joel. For the gifts of his heart and for his mind, which brought us joy and happiness, and now will become a precious heritage of the Spirit. For all these and more, we give thee our praise. Grant unto us, O Lord, the strength of all the generations of our people, who in the face of bereavement proclaimed Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. The Lord hath given, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Adonai Natan, Lord, thou hast given. Thou hast given to us our dear Joel Braverman. For all that was good and endearing in his life, we offer the deeper thanks of our hearts. Adonai Lakach, and Lord, thou hast taken. Thou hast called him unto thyself. We pray thee, O God, for the courage to make our broken hearts an altar, before which we acknowledge thy sovereignty and thy love, as we say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. May thy name be blessed now and forevermore. Amen. Dear Susan, dear Seth and Julie, dear Jill and Mark, dear Jacob and Jonathan, dear Stephen and Janet, dear family and friends all. As you surely know, Susan, we have, after all, been part of one another's life in one way or another for more than 7 decades. I retired from congregational life nearly 13 years ago after 42 years of serving as a rabbi in Israel in 4 very different congregations, in Great Neck on Long Island, in Tenafly, New Jersey, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and finally 17 years as a rabbi of Temple Beth Torah in Wellington here in Palm Beach County. I've officiated at countless baby namings and brisses and b'nai mitzvah and, of course, weddings and funerals. I'm certainly no stranger to the Jewish life cycle, the laughter and the tears of our people. And I've stood in this place and dozens like it for nearly 5.5 decades, tell the stories of those men and women who have filled our lives with their love and their commitment, their victories and their defeats, their hopes and their dreams. And now, after well more than half a century of serving as a rabbi, I cannot help but think of the countless faces of people whom I have loved and who are missing from our lives. I could name so many of those names, and I often do. But to be perfectly honest, I have rarely felt quite so inadequate about telling the story of a man who was so very deeply loved by you, Susan, and by you, Seth and Jill, by you, Jacob and Jonathan, and of course by you, Stephen and Janet, and by your children, as well as by your families and your friends. A man who has been a part of my life since we first met him not long after Lisa and I moved to South Florida 3 decades ago, but who was and is part of a family with whom both of us have had a very long and very precious friendship. Susan, you and I have known one another since you moved to Riverdale and then enrolled in the 5th grade at PS 81 in the Bronx, where I had been a student since kindergarten and where we became classmates and friends until we both graduated from elementary school as 8th graders and then lost touch with one another as we attended 2 physically close but very different high schools. But my family's connection to your family, Susan, runs far deeper than even our venerable relationship. My wife, Lisa, was, of course, a dear friend of Joel's brother, Stephen, and his sister-in-law, Janet, since the days they each attended PS 27 in Yonkers, and then Hawthorne Junior High School, and finally Yonkers High School. A friendship with Lisa and Janet managed to keep alive until we were reunited with Stephen and Janet when we both just happened to wind up here in South Florida. And their friendship, which now, of course, included me, reignited and then became a very precious part of our lives. A friendship which did indeed bring you and Joel back into our lives as well. our getting together from time to time and with you, and of course, our keeping up with your very full and very busy life through Janet and Stephen. So I believe with all my heart, Susan, that our being together for this very sad occasion is no mere coincidence. It is beshert. It is fated in the very truest sense of the word, for we're now all connected to one another in the most profound manner one could possibly imagine. And you're asking me, therefore, to be part of this incredibly difficult moment in your lives. Touches me in ways that go way beyond mere words to describe. So reflecting upon that relationship as we honor and celebrate your husband and your father and your father-in-law and your grandfather and your brother and your brother-in-law and your uncle is indeed an enormously daunting challenge for me. And because of all this and so much more, I realized how difficult it would be to reflect those emotions in mere words, and more importantly, to capture the memories of your husband and your father and your father-in-law and your brother and your brother-in-law, which you also lovingly and abundantly shared with me. And so I thought a great deal about what I wanted to say about Joel. I wanted, of course, to make sure that the words which I would use would serve to celebrate his long and very full life, and would provide just a bit of solace and comfort to each of you as you mourn Joel's loss. But for whatever reasons, these words did not come easily to me as I sat down yesterday at my home computer to put order to the emotions which I felt and the stories which you shared with me. But I do know that words must indeed be spoken. Words about your husband and your father and your father and your grandfather and your brother and your brother-in-law. I wrote that a lot. Words of caring, words of celebration, but most of all, words of love, reflecting a man whose life touched each of your lives, and indeed so many other lives, so very profoundly. A life which was in so many different ways filled with enormous meaning and genuine beauty. And so how does one express the love that each of you felt for Joel, as well as the immeasurable love which he felt for each of you? And of course, the affection which I now feel for the entire Braverman Blackman family, extended in every single direction. So how does one do all of this when the words seem so inadequate to the loss and to the love? So indeed, what can I say about Joel Braverman that anyone who knew him and anyone who loved him does not already know? Well, I suppose that I could begin by sharing the words with you, which you, Susan, said when I asked you to describe Joel to me, as Seth and Julie and Jill and Mark and Stephen and Janet and you and I spoke together Saturday afternoon while we were sitting together around your dining room table, Stephen and Janet. You said, Susan, without a moment's hesitation, that Joel, simply put, shared several different but most certainly related passions. You said that he loved skiing and he loved sailing, that he absolutely loved to travel, enjoying most especially cruising in the high seas with family and friends, that he loved playing and watching so many different sports, that he played basketball in both high school and then for NYU while in college, that he was an avid, and I would add, a pretty good golfer, always proud of the hole-in-one he landed just before his 75th birthday, adding finally that he tried never to miss any of his three grandsons' sporting events, becoming a passionate fan of any sports team fielded by the colleges that each of them attended. And then you, Jill, added that all of your friends just adored your dad, that he made it a point to get to know each of them and to engage them in topics in which they were interested, concluding that he was enormously outgoing, so extraordinarily friendly, always looking to make new connections. To which you, Julie, then added that your father-in-law was tremendously curious about so many different and varied subjects, always wanting to learn more about everything and everyone, that he possessed a truly phenomenal memory, become a storehouse of all manner of trivia, and that he received an enormous amount of pleasure from just telling stories, and that he could, if he chose, command any table around which he was sitting and any room in which he found himself. And then each of you, in turn, added to the portrait that Susan had begun. One of you remembering that he was a fabulous game player, an expert in playing bridge or gin or even rummikub, or of course, Trivial Pursuit, especially while sailing aboard a cruise ship. That he was a bit of an expert on the daily Wordle and connections games, often comparing answers with you, Jill. And then you remembering, Stephen, that your brother just loved the music of the 1950s, recalling how much he idolized Cousin Brucey, one of the most popular radio disc jockeys during the years in which he was growing up. You're writing then, Stephen, that Joel especially loved Frank Sinatra and would often sing along with him when his records were playing. I don't know if you know what records are, but I'll tell you later. On the radio or the record player, and that he was a great fan of Broadway shows, and could spend hours listening to original cast albums of the performances he knew so well. And then, stroke by stroke, you all completed the portrait of your husband and your dad and your brother. One of you emphasizing that Joel made friends so very easily, and that he knew how to keep them for decade upon decade. Friends he made while a camper at Camp Alomar in Stormville, New York, and friends he made while a student in Yonkers, and friends he made as a member of the yacht club on the Hudson River in which Susan and he belonged, as well as the many friends they both made in more recent years while living in their home in the Ibis Country Club just down the road, making friends easily and keeping them close ferociously. Adding then that he loved dining out at fine restaurants, and of course traveling, determined to cram in as many activities as possible into his life after watching his father, who died young shortly after his own retirement, never having had the opportunity to enjoy the fruit of his labors. And finally, you said, Susan, that your husband's happy place was without a doubt the home the two of you owned on Snow Mountain in Vermont, where he would enjoy skiing and most of all, the undivided attention of his beloved family. Joel always feeling truly fortunate in his life, making it a point to enjoy every moment with which he was blessed, whether he was traveling or with his family or simply watching his favorite television program. But most of all, you all agreed that your husband and your father and your father-in-law and your brother and I don't want to leave anyone out, and your brother-in-law was above all else a family man who was born 84 years ago on July 5th, 1941 in New York City, and that he grew up until he was 13 living in it with his family in an apartment on Morris Avenue in the Bronx, sharing his bedroom until he was a teenager. Boy, must have been tough, with his baby brother, Stephen, who was 5 years younger than he was. Before his family moved into the newly built co-ops on Riverdale Avenue in South Yonkers, my grandmother lived there, and my mother lived across the street. We all know those places. That his father, Eugene, always called Gene, supported himself and his family as a CPA, most often working out of his home, undoubtedly one of the very first remote workers in the country. His dad always remembers as an exceptionally kind and gentle man, while his mother, Evie, was a homemaker, remembered as an exceptionally loving mom who absolutely adored her two sons. Joel, of course, remaining close to his parents throughout their lives. His father dying young as a result of early onset Parkinson's disease at the age of 63, while his mom lived until she was 83. Joel growing up close to both of them, as well as to his grandparents, Evie's parents, Sam and Sarah, who always had a very special place in Joel's heart. Evie and Jean lovingly caring for her mother for 12 years until she passed away. And Joel, of course, sharing a very special connection with his younger brother, Stephen, until he and his wife, Janet, moved to Northern Virginia. Happily, the two brothers rekindling the ties which bound them one to the other once both of them and their families had relocated here to South Florida, talking on the telephone, meeting, just the two of them, often, sharing a relationship which came, of course, to include Joel's family as well as Stephen's wife, Janet, and their daughters, Lee and Amy. Joel becoming a caring uncle to his nieces and their families. Joel, of course, started his education as a student in New York City public schools until he and his family moved to Westchester County, where Joel attended Yonkers High School, where he played basketball for his alma mater, seeing himself as a star until Stephen came along 5 years later. This appraisal, no surprise, coming from his younger brother. That following high school graduation, Joel enrolled at NYU in Greenwich Village, where he majored in business, commuting to and from school from his family's apartment in Yonkers. That indeed, when the very eligible Joel Braverman was at the time a senior at NYU, became part of a new carpool in 1963, in which the very lovely Susan Herlinger was a fellow passenger. That when Susan, who was at the time of their meeting a freshman at NYU, also majoring in business, met Joel, it was, as you said, Susan, love at first sight for both of you. and the two were married on July 10th, 1965, the beginning of a union which was to last for the next 6 decades, a marriage in which you both enjoyed doing things together. He worrying about one thing, while you, Susan, invariably worried about something else. You're proudly teaching Joel how to ski. 60 years of a marriage which you proudly pointed to, Susan, as one that really just managed to work. A union to which you, Seth, and Jill could point with enormous pride and gratitude as a model for your own marriages. A union to which each of you could aspire, watching as your dad quite simply adored your mom. That the young couple began their married life in an apartment on Warburton Avenue in North Yonkers, with Joel supporting himself and his new wife working as a salesman for the Olivetti typewriter company. I can explain to anyone younger what a typewriter is also. Working his way up the management ladder of the company, while Susan augmented their income, becoming first part of the executive training program sponsored by the old Gimbel's department store, eventually working for HR for the Temco Service Company, which just happened to have its offices in the very same building in which Joel's offices were located. Then in 1965, Joel and Susan moved into their first home located on Feeney Street in Ossining, a home into which they welcomed their two children, Seth in 1970 and Jill in 1972, and in which the young family remained for the next 7 years before the Bravermans moved into Joel and Susan's dream home, located in the Millwood neighborhood of Ossining, the home in which Seth and Jill, of course, largely grew up, and in which Joel and Susan shared a wonderful life together. Susan eventually returning to work, this time as a real estate agent in Westchester, once Jill was a bit older. The family living in a truly great community in which they shared a fabulous social life, which they were both, of course, working long hours. The couple never missing a Saturday evening date night in which Seth and Jill were, of course, left behind with a babysitter. I don't think they've ever quite forgiven you for that. Joel and Susan enjoying shared meals out together, in which Joel invariably would ask the waiter for blue cheese dressing if you happen to have any. The family making many, many new friends. Indeed, friends who were, in the deepest sense, like family to the Bravermans. Joel and Susan beginning their travel thanks at first in part, to Joel's employment for the Italian company Olivetti, and then, of course, expanding exponentially with the years in which Susan's parents, Fred and Minnie Herlinger, became a second set of parents to Joel. Minnie just loved to cook, and Joel happily just loved to eat. That in 1979, Joel and Susan fulfilled a lifelong dream by purchasing a small home in Vermont, which they over the years tripled in size, their ski lodge, which they all lovingly called the Wilderness, becoming a center of their family's life as the Braverman family grew and expanded. Joel retiring from work at the age of 58, remembering how his father sadly never had the opportunity to enjoy his own retirement, with Susan, of course, following Joel into retirement, which allowed the two of them to really begin to travel and precipitated their move to the Ibis Country Club in suburban West Palm Beach, where they lived for the next 16 years, sharing a really, as you said, Susan, great life together. Golfing as much as you both wanted, making many, many new friends and very precious friendships together. A place in which your children and their spouses, and eventually your 3 grandsons, could come, share time together, and create great memories, most especially the holiday celebrations they shared together as a family each December. The two of you deciding to move from Ibis to the Wycliffe Country Club in Wellington. We lived for just 4 years, followed by a quick move to the Gulf Coast of Florida, and finally relocating once again to Florida's East Coast, where you purchased a home in the Palm Isles West development of Boynton Beach. These halcyon years were, of course, sadly shadowed by a long list of health issues with which Joel was challenged. Joel never letting his friends and acquaintances know how difficult life was becoming for him, and believing that health stuff should not get in the way of his enjoying his life and with his wife, his family, and his many friends. Joel and Susan continuing their traveling together as long as they possibly could. The family enjoying an incredible 60th anniversary celebration, an extraordinary few days in an Airbnb last summer in nearby Pompano Beach. Joel enjoying life as best he could until he was hospitalized last Sunday evening, where his health precipitously declined. His family, and of course, visiting with him until Joel peacefully passed away, but a handful of hours ago. That Joel was, as you said, Seth, a really great father. And you will hear directly from Seth and from Jill in a moment. A father who was, to you, Seth, a real mentor, even serving as your team's first basketball coach when you began to play on the Leach and Thomas squad, a team sponsored, appropriately enough today, by a funeral home in Ossining. A father who was a real presence in both your life and in Jill's life. Our father was enormously supportive and rarely critical. Our father was, as you said, Jill, simply the best. You're becoming his little girl whom he just loved to talk to, always interested in everything you did and every accomplishment which you mastered. Our father was always present in your life, becoming a dad who was so extraordinarily proud of his two children, of the people they became, of the lives they led, of the careers they chose, of the families they created. Joel becoming then, as you said, Julie, a wonderful father-in-law who simply loved and literally embraced you with his big hugs. You're seeing him as a deeply curious man who shared wonderful conversations with you whenever he could. If you let them, they would go on for hours. Always impressed by how much Joel really knew. To which you, Mark, then added that to you, Joel became a friend with whom you could discuss just about anything, recalling how much you admired his outgoing nature and how deeply your father-in-law loved his family and how he welcomed Julie and you into that family as one of his own. And finally, Joel became an amazing grandfather to Seth and Julie's son, Luke, and to Jill and Mark's sons, Jacob and Jonathan, three grandsons who became an enormous source of pride to their pop, really getting to know each grandson, not just in passing, but really getting to know them as individuals. Grandfather who absolutely relished the incredible meatball sausage barbecues he would prepare for his grandsons whenever they would visit here in South Florida. Blessed, of course, with the years to see each of them grow and to begin their tomorrows, indeed to become his tomorrow, his bit of eternity. And now his story becomes each of yours, to tell and to retell, a door, from generation to generation for the rest of your lives. And who better to speak of Joel's long and very full life than his children, Seth Braverman and Jill Blackman, followed by his grandsons, Jacob and Jonathan Blackman, and finally his dear brother, Stephen, baby brother, I've been calling you, Stephen Braverman. Seth, you're first.
Thank you, Rabbi Pinsky. And thank you to everybody who is here with us today and also joining us online. My dad wanted this to be a celebration of life when he was gone, and the best way to do that is to celebrate him by sharing a few of the great memories I have with my father. As the rabbi mentioned, he was my first basketball coach, and we always shared a love for the game. When I was younger, our team was St. John's with Lou Carnesecca and Chris Mullen, and we watched a lot of games together. Always really enjoyed that. And then, of course, I went off to college, and it's hard to coordinate watching games. But just a few weeks ago, I came back to visit, and there happened to be St. John's UConn game on TV. It was the one at MSG, and we had a really good time watching that game. It was, for me, like traveling back in time. He was always supportive of me as a player and came to all my high school games. But before those games, there were hours of one-on-one in the driveway, and I was at a little disadvantage. I learned to shoot with a big guy in my face and the skill of boxing out to get rebounds. And as a lefty, he challenged me to also use my right hand so the defender wouldn't know which way I was going, even though I thought I knew better. But turns out he was right about that. And you know, all those hours in the driveway and other gyms and playing with neighbors and their dads, and I wouldn't have had the high school basketball success that I enjoyed. So I could go on about our common interests in sports and other sports like skiing and golf and tennis. And, for someone who really couldn't move that well, he actually covered the net pretty good, big reach. So, that wasn't so easy for me. But, oh, and also going to, not that I ever played football, but we enjoyed going to New York Jets games at Shea Stadium. And because I played a lot of soccer, AYSO as a kid, I was pretty decent at kicking a ball. So this all inspired me to enter pass, punt, and kick competitions. Two of the three skills I was pretty good at, throwing not the one, and had some success there as well. And regardless of the sport, though, learning to compete, even if I didn't have my best stuff that day, and having high expectations for myself was something that I learned from him. And not only in sports, but I learned the hard way the day a school leaf gathering project was due. I was content doing enough to get probably a B, maybe even a little less. And I was happy enough with that passing grade when I went to bed the night before it was due. Well, I guess I had left that project out on the counter, and they had a look at it, and it turned out there was a grade, what you need for grade sheet on the inside of the cover, and so for an A required some extra effort. So at dawn, I was awoken and told to go finish gathering the rest of those leaves, and I did get a better grade. So he taught me to, put the time and effort into the things that mattered. And I worked for my dad and his partner Ed for 2 years in New York, working side by side. He really showed me how to hustle and work hard, and setting goals and working towards, building something. He was always supportive of my dreams and ambitions and encouraged me in everything I did, whether it was moving across the country or moving into a different industry. He really believed in me. And when I was looking at colleges, there was an interview, and one of the questions that they ask you, or that I was asked in this interview, this was at University of Vermont. Why? I think one of the last questions was, if it was between you and another student, why are you the better fit to come here to this school versus somebody else? And I thought about it for just a second, and I said, it's because I look really good in green. It's a true story. And so, I thought that was clever. So I got back to the car, and my parents were there, and they asked me how it went. And of course, I mentioned the look good in green. My mom pretty much threw up her hands and said, we can cross UVM off the list. But my dad said, you know what? That's actually a pretty good answer. Well done. And it turned out it was the right move, because I did go there. So Dad was always cool under pressure. I remember one family drive up to Vermont late at night, which we did pretty regularly, but the conditions were kind of bad that night, and very cold and snowing, and we had some trouble with the car, and needed to take some action to finish our journey. So we got out, we somehow got chains on the tires, and made it through. And he never panicked. Like we just got it done. But I do remember one time when he almost lost his cool, when he got pulled over by police in Vermont one evening. We had a full car of, kids and cousins, and I piped up from the back of the car as the officer, got to the window and was asking for his license. I said, "Dad, you speeding again?" At which point the officer was like, "Oh, really? Well, Mr. Braverman, step out of the car, sir." And not my finest moment, but I paid for that one. The following years, anytime we went up in the winter, there was this one pesky pipe area kind of underneath the house that would freeze, get some water in there and freeze. So I became the one to crawl under the house with a hairdryer and an extension cord to thaw out that pipe before we could really enjoy our weekends. Okay. Another great thing about my dad was that he loved to eat and make great food. And I have some wonderful memories of him on the grill, especially great at making the perfect steaks. And but one of our favorites to make was something called a Landy's wedge. And for those of you from Yonkers, you might recall there was a deli called Landy's, old school cold cut heroes, and they were just delicious. They became kind of the gold standard for for the subs that I enjoyed. And one of our last conversations, I was having some trouble replicating the flavors of the Landy's wedge, and I just couldn't figure out what was going on. And he said, it's really all in the bread. It's all in the bread. And I changed the bread, and it was perfect. So good call there. And I also remember when I was little, he would make my mom tuna melts at bedtime, and they would let me stay up for the Johnny Carson monologue, which was a treat for me because, well, he knew that food was love. But above all else, Dad was about family. He took amazing care of Jill, Mom, and me. He was an incredible grandfather to Luke, Jake, and John, and loved spending time with them. And Luke actually learned rather recently that Rummy Q victories were not going to come easy. And he loved my wife Julie. He this 20 years ago, he wasn't feeling that great around our wedding time, and one or more of the doctors that he had seen said, "Listen, you really shouldn't make this trip." And we didn't even know this. This was, we found this out after the fact. But he would not be denied, and was there with my mom to walk me down the aisle. And when I had some of my own health issues just a few years ago, he and Mom came up to Connecticut to help take care of me. It's really great. So I'm going to miss my dad a lot. But these and other wonderful memories of our time together will never fade away. So I love you, Dad. I love you.
Oh boy. Um, Seth, that was beautiful. And we did not look at each other's speeches before today, and it's very funny because I completely have to rewrite mine on the fly right now because there's a lot of similarities, as there always is, and how Dad would be happy for that. Rabbi Pinsky, thank you so much for those beautiful words. First, my mom asked me to thank all of you for your support and your love from Chicago, New Jersey, Los Angeles, Arizona, San Francisco, New York, Colorado, all of our friends online as well. Thank you. Thank you to their Ibis family. Thank you to their longtime Westchester family, old friends, and new friends too. Thank you for being here today to honor my dad. In his last days, lying in the hospital bed, he said something to me that was so completely him. And he actually had to like take off the mask to say it because he was on the machine. But he looked at me and he said, "I'm a lucky guy." And I really haven't stopped thinking about that because, of course, he did. Even then, even there, that was my dad. He looked at life with gratitude, with perspective, with heart. And the truth is, he really was a lucky guy. But I think everyone here knows something else is true too, that we were the lucky ones. We were the lucky ones because we got him. We got to know him. We got to love him. We got to laugh with him. And we got to be part of his life. But I got to be the daughter. I got to be the baby of the family. I got to be daddy's not so little girl. And no matter how old I got, some part of me never stopped needing my dad. So while I know everyone here is grieving him in their own way and for their own reasons, I am grieving him as a daughter, as someone who knew his love, not just as admiration or friendship, but as shelter, as safety, and something that really shaped my whole life. When I shared the news of my dad's passing with my good friends, I saw the same message come back to me over and over. I know how much you loved him. I know how close you were. I know how much he loved you. And it was true. Daddy, it is true. As you've heard earlier, Daddy was smart, really smart. That he was also funny, and he was loyal, and he was kind. And he had a remarkable way of making people he loved feel safe and known and cared for. Excuse my tissues. He taught me a lot, and I want to maybe share some of those lessons with you. So, Seth, you were not the only one that he taught lessons, but he had some different ones for me. Sometimes those lessons were gentle, sometimes not as much, sometimes maybe a little more intensity. One of the ones I'm thinking of is he taught me how to, when I was learning to drive, I was not going to drive unless it was with a stick shift. That's how you learn to drive. And you learn to drive, for those from Ossining, on the Brookside Hill, which was extremely steep. And day one, you go out there. That was no easy task, but he expected that. And I think that the lesson he was trying to tell me, something that stayed with me, he taught me I could do hard things. He taught me not to give up just because something is hard. And I think he taught me that many times because it had happened earlier in life when I wanted, we talked about Vermont a little bit, when I wanted to get a ski ticket. I don't know if I even knew what it meant. I just knew on my jacket, I wanted a ski ticket. And Dad was not going to buy me a lift ticket until I knew how to ski. And I was like, wait a second, don't I need a lift ticket to learn to ski? And took me to the bottom of, for our Mount Snow friends, Ski Baba, and left the two skis there and said, teach yourself. You got all day. And I would have to walk up the mountain with my skis till I could figure out how to get that snowplow. And at the end of the day, I did it. I taught myself to ski, and the next day I got that lift ticket. That lesson stayed with me. I can do hard things. And speaking of skiing, as you heard earlier, Dad's happy place was our home in Vermont, the wilderness. Seth, I made that sign. I would say that so much of my happiest childhood lives there. And I know he loved every single second of being there. I actually never had to climb under the house with a hair dryer. But he loved that place. He loved the skiing, the weekends, bringing friends and family there. The annual Christmas party he loved, packing the igloo for the lodge, those sandwiches. And then there were the weekends when I was a little bit older that it was just the two of us. A couple times we would ride up the Taconic in the Honda Prelude, blasting Barry Manilow on the cassette, singing along. I loved those rides so much. And I can still kind of feel them. But I think as the older I get, I think there was even a lesson in that because those rides were not just rides in the car. They were time together. They were love. They were me and Dad sharing music, sharing life. He taught me, really, without ever saying it, that time with the people you love is never wasted. And he gave me so much of what I still love. I think I've been preempted in the 50s music, but Daddy, you know, I know Johnny Mathis, Bobby Darin. I know them all. I know Cousin Brucey well. And Dad definitely grew my love for Broadway and how lucky we were to have those records, Guys and Dolls. So even now when I hear something from Guys and Dolls or I see it on TV, it doesn't just sound like music, it sounds like him. Dad also taught me, and I'm looking out here, to be a friend because I watched my dad keep friendships across decades, across states, across every chapter of his life. Friends from Yonkers, from Westchesters, from Vermont, from work, from Florida, even from his cruises. He stayed connected and he made room for people. Somehow he also kept making new friends wherever he went, because that's who he was. I actually laughed thinking one time they came to visit Mark and I in Chicago, and they're like, we have dinner plans tonight. I was like, who do you know in Chicago? Oh, we met this lovely family on a cruise and wherever they went. He was open, he was warm, he was interested in people, and I think people felt that. I think he taught me confidence, as Seth said, but in a different way, not by talking about it, just by living it. When he started his own business my freshman year of college, I think that took courage and that took belief in himself. And I think that taught me to believe in myself. I certainly, as Seth said, can't stand up here without mentioning sports, because how could I not? So we'll talk about the Jets in just a minute. I guess I want to talk. You've heard he's a mean rummy, not mean, like good rummy cube player. Cards, Trivial Pursuit. The lesson was the fun matters. Laughter matters. So we played a lot. I definitely got my love of photography from my dad. I grew up with actual slideshows, not like computer slideshows, but you know, those, what did they call them? Those wheels and carousels, that we had closets full of them. And I actually taught him how to transfer those slides to digital. But he then grew that into a hobby of making Shutterfly photo books. And in their house, they have a huge stack, huge, every trips and events. And I love those photo books. And actually, the last one he built was one of the house in Vermont, the history of the house in Vermont. He loved going out to dinner. He loved a French restaurant. He loved a routine. He loved making coffee for mom in the morning, every morning. And he loved simple pleasures like taking the grandkids out in the convertible for a ride, maybe even the golf cart too, maybe even letting them drive. He knew how to enjoy life while it was happening. He loved the big moments, dancing with me. As you heard, he loved Frank Sinatra. That was our wedding song. You look beautiful tonight at my wedding, our wedding. Cutting the challah at the boys' bar mitzvahs. He loved playing golf. He especially loved playing golf with Seth. I heard a lot about it. But he loved the small moments, making me my favorite steak. As you heard, he was good on the grill with that special mustard sauce. Ooh, did I love that? I actually also wrote about Landy's because Landy's was in Yonkers, a special place. But what I remember about Landy's is when we walked in, hey, Joey, how you doing? Who's this? And he loved introducing me to all the people there. But more than anything, he loved being Pops. He was so proud of his 3 grandchildren. Anything that they were doing mattered to him. Jacob's ice hockey, got to see him play in person. I would text him updates from the games. Johnny swimming, he watched every live stream, even got to see him swim in person. Luke's ski jumping, saw all the videos from out there in the West. But not just sports, Model UN or traveling or the cruises or the boats. Whatever mattered to them mattered to him. And as soon as those boys entered college, those schools had a new dedicated fan. Miami, Denver, Purdue. He followed it. He asked about it. He paid attention. Dad and I were excited to watch the early rounds of this year's NCAA tournament together. Because as Seth said, to hang out with Dad would be to love basketball. So I have it here, Seth. I wrote the same thing. I grew up watching St. John's and learning very clearly to despise Georgetown. And of course, he loved the Knicks. And so I had to love the Knicks too. And my dad was a loyal, lifelong, long-suffering Jets fan, a former season ticket holder. He took Seth to the games. I didn't get to go to those games. Seth got those tickets, but I caught the fever and we're still believing, still waiting, still hoping. And Dad, when they make it, we'll watch with you. But one of the things about the Jets, about football, why I connected with my dad over that, it wasn't about the team. It was because he was better than any television announcer at the play-by-play. And sometimes I would purposely call during a Jets game just to hear him give me the play-by-play, even if I didn't completely understand what he was saying. I just love hearing him do it. He was especially excited to see Jacob graduate from the University of Miami in a few months. And while it breaks our hearts that he will not be there in the way we wished, I know he will still be there with us in spirit. I also want to say how much it meant to me that he embraced Mark from the very beginning. He made room for him. He made it clear how much he loved me, and in his own way, he made it clear what that meant. Be good to her. And Daddy, he is. And beyond that, he built a real relationship with Mark through sports, conversation, and respect, and that meant a lot. It still does. But maybe the greatest thing that my dad taught me was what love looks like. He loved my mother faithfully, visibly, and consistently. As you heard, Every Saturday night of my childhood, they went out on a date. Every single Saturday night. That was just what they did. They loved going out to dinner. They loved being with friends, many of you here today. And I thank you for your friendship with them. Mom and Dad loved being together. We were truly best friends for more than 60 years. Mom, for his entire life, you did an incredible job taking care of him, especially at the end. Every little thing. And he knew it because he said to me, Mom takes such good care of me. What a gift it was to grow up seeing that kind of love, real love, long love, chosen love, the kind of love that keeps showing up year after year after year after year, all the way to 60. I feel incredibly lucky that I got to witness that my whole life. But when I think about my dad, what comes back to me the most is not just what he did, it's how he made people feel. He made all of us feel loved, feel protected, feel known, and feel like we mattered. And for me, he made me feel that no matter what happened, whether I was a little girl who needed to be driven from house to house on Halloween, he did that, or 53-year-old just last week trying to navigate life, somehow everything was going to be okay because my dad was there. Here's what I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss his voice. I will miss his hugs. I will miss our calls, his humor, our competitive wordle and connections. No one was better. I never beat my dad at either. I will miss sharing my every single day with him. And I will simply just miss the comfort of knowing he was there. And still, through all of this heartbreak, I keep coming back to the words from his hospital bed. I'm a lucky guy. He was. But he got one thing wrong. The lucky ones were us. We were lucky to have him. Lucky to be raised by him. Lucky to be loved by him. Lucky to laugh with him. Lucky to call him dad, pops, husband, brother, uncle, friend. Lucky that he was ours. And if a life can be measured by love and loyalty, family, friendship, laughter, and by showing up again and again for the people who matter most, then his was a beautiful life. So maybe the truest thing I can say today is this: yes, he was a lucky guy. But because of him, so are we.
Whenever I hop in the car for my commute to class or a trip to the supermarket, calling Pops and Grandma is one of my priorities. When I called, I always felt free to share whatever was on my mind. Pops always knew what to say and when to say it. Aside from catching up, we'd love to talk about college hoops. Ever since I was admitted to Purdue,
Let me, when I called, I always felt free to share whatever was on my mind. Pops always knew what to say and when to say it. Aside from catching up, we love to talk about college hoops. Ever since I was admitted to Purdue, he was an instant fan. He would share insights, opinions, and comparisons to the game back in his day. I will never forget the day when he told me they used to play without a three-point line. That blew my mind. Aside from basketball, Pops also introduced me to the game I love most, golf. I fondly remember the days at the Ibis driving range where he taught me how to swing a club and not throw the balls downrange. As my interest in the game grew during my high school years, our conversations started getting more and more in depth. Those moments with Pops are what I'll miss the most. Though I'll miss seeing Pops during the holidays, I think I'll miss our phone calls the most. I love you, Pops, and I'm going to miss you.
Most people knew him as Joel, a good friend, a smart person, and many other words used to describe a remarkable man. But to me, he was my pops. Every Christmas growing up, I was fortunate to visit my grandparents in Florida. Pops and I played countless rounds of golf, rummy cue, and the quiet game, a game I would always lose. One thing I definitely inherited from him was my competitive nature. Beyond the games, he also taught me the important life lessons. The first and arguably the most important was to always treat others with respect, especially my mom. Pops led by example, and the way he treated people showed the kind of person he was. Um, if you knew my Pops well, you know he was an avid cruiser. He had traveled the world by ship, visiting all the continents except Antarctica. I remember when he shared this part of his life with me, he took me on my very first cruise back in 2018. Since this Caribbean cruise, I've wanted to go on more and more cruises. We would talk often over FaceTime, and he helped me prepare for my first solo 17-night cruise across the Pacific. After every cruise either of us went on, we would give each other a full in-depth recap, talking about all the details, like whether the lobster was free or extra, and which shows were worth seeing or not. Without him, I can honestly say I might not have branched out and tried many of the things I have. For that, thank you, Pops. To everyone else, he was Joel, but to me, he was my Pops, my grandfather, my role model, and someone I will always be grateful for.
Thank you, Rabbi Pinsky, Jill, and Seth, and the boys. I mean, just beautiful, eloquent eulogies. Thank you. And I want to thank everybody for coming to celebrate Joel's life. He touched so many people. And as Jill said, so many of you have come from out of town and from all over to honor Joel. And frankly, I'm not surprised. You've heard about Joel as a husband, a father, and a grandfather. Now I can tell you how Joel was as a brother. He was the best. He was the best I could have asked for. And I miss him immensely. We were always close. I miss our talks on the phone, at lunch, FaceTime. We always FaceTime because we wanted to see each other. Always. It was never just a regular call. I mean, he could have been at Home Depot. There was that FaceTime. It just didn't matter. You know, I've had a lot of time over the last several days I just had random memories growing up with Joel, my big brother. He's always my big brother. And I'll share some of those with you. And most of those memories just drove my parents crazy. I mean, we were two big guys. We slept in the same bedroom in an apartment in Yonkers. And our beds were like at opposite walls, and our heads were on the opposite walls. And my mother used to put us to sleep, say goodnight, boys. And, say goodnight, give her a kiss. And about 10 minutes later, Joel would say, let's throw a football around. Because we had a little football. And we did. We turned on a lamp and we threw a football around. And other nights, well, we always had a hoop made out of a hanger, made a hoop out of a hanger. This goes way back. And they don't do it today. Today you can buy it in a store. It's really nice. But we put it on top of the closet and you close the door. And you had a hoop with a backboard. So my mother would put us to sleep. And Joel would say, hey, let's shoot some hoops. And we did. We shot hoops. We did that a lot. And we did some other crazy things that really drove my parents crazy. The infamous incident was we had a dartboard, and the dartboard was in the den. It was on the wall, and we used to throw darts. And we were pretty good at it. And one day he wasn't there, and I was practicing throwing darts because I wanted to beat him all the time. Well, unfortunately, he walked in at the wrong time. He got a dart in the leg. Truly, I'm not making this up. This is true. I couldn't make this up. Well, I did not make it to the front door before he tackled me and really beat the hell out of me. And then we also, another just memory that popped into my head that goes way back when we were children. My parents had a little table in the living room, and it rotated, it spun around, but it had an opening on all the sides. And he used to put me in the table. In the table. He said, Stevie, go in the table underneath. And I said, no, Dad's going to just kill it. He said, no, go ahead. So I did. And that was so much fun. He'd spin me around, just spin me around. And we did that time after time. Mom didn't even care. It was so much fun. So that'll give you a little sense of Joel, growing up with Joel. But he was always the instigator. He was the instigator, but he had it all planned out. He knew I was the one that would catch hell, and he was right. It's just the way he planned it. And I wanted to say one thing before I forgot. The St. John Seth. I think he might have loved, I never talked about this, but he might have loved St. John's because when we went to camp, the St. John's basketball team used to come up every summer with Lou Conaseca. And they stayed for a week and they tutored us on how to take jump shots and whatnot. And we always look forward to that. So I think that might be where he started to love St. John's. And as far as Landy's wedges, Jill, this was not in my notes. Later on, when I went into Landy's, he used to say, Frank Landy. He would say, hey, Joey. I say, no, Stevie. Joel moved away. Joel's not Joey. So it's always Joey. You know, as teenagers, of course, you know, sports and basketball especially seems to be a theme here, basketball. It became the center of our lives. We played mostly at School 27 behind the school, the local schoolyard. And at the Jewish Community Center, we played basketball in leagues. And when we played behind School 27, we'd play 5-on-5 and we'd have a game, usually his friends against my friends. We're 5 years apart. And then after the game, he would say, come on, let's go one-on-one. So, you know, he always wanted to go one-on-one. And he taught me how to go down low and use my body, because he, at that time, had a pretty good body, and he would always box me out, and he always beat me. He always beat me one-on-one. He was older and weighed a lot more. He was taller too, so, you know, he always won. He always won. I gave it my best. And then we went to Camp Alomar. Those were the best years. Still the best years. I'll never forget them. And one year he was my counselor. And he always picked on me. And I never complained about a conflict of interest, but I should have. He should have never been my brother. And in those days at camp, and I'm sure at other camps, if you misbehaved, you got the paddle. You know, and you had to bend over and he gave you the paddle. Well, he gave me the paddle more often than others. And you had to say, thank you, sir, may I please have another one? Thank you, sir, may I please have another one? And he would do it again and again. But, you know, I was thinking about that the other day, and I think they were really love taps. That's what they were. They were love taps. And at camp, we were always connected together, and even outside of camp. At camp, we were known as Little Duck and Big Duck. I got the name Little Duck because when I ran to first base, I waddled. I ran like a duck. Now, he didn't waddle, but because I was a Little Duck, he became Big Duck. I don't know why. And then at home, I was Bravo, and I became Little Bravo, and he became Big Bravo. So we were always linked together, always. Excuse me, they're sticking together. I will just say, because I know we're kind of running late, that, you know, when we left New York in 1972 and we moved to Virginia, and Joel stayed in New York, we raised our family in Virginia, outside Washington, D.C., and Reston, Virginia. You know, we didn't lose touch with each other. We spoke, but you know, we were separated by distance, and it was difficult. But the blessing was that we all wound up in Florida. Joel moved down before we did, and then Janet and I retired to Florida, in Boynton Beach. And eventually, Joel and Susan practically became neighbors. The last couple of years when they moved back from the West Coast were just a blessing. I spent a lot of quality time with Joel. And I'm just going to miss him so much. And just one more thing. Jill mentioned that he always said he was a lucky guy. Well, he just said that to me so many times over the last year or so. He was getting a little melancholy. And I said, Joel, you weren't lucky. You worked hard to raise your family and a career, and everything you got at the end of your work life, you deserved. So you weren't lucky. You earned it. Rest in peace, bro. I love you. Miss you.
Susan, I am so glad that Miss Rasmussen was our fifth grade class teacher and that I had the privilege of knowing you for so long, and Lisa, your family, and that you thought enough of me to allow me to share this time with you. What a beautiful family. I'm really deeply saddened that I didn't have an older brother. I had an older sister. Never learned to play basketball. Never did any other things. But you do have three grandsons. I have four grandchildren with three granddaughters. I think Luke is going to have to wait for my 13-year-old, for my 11-year-old, but I have one for each of you, so we can connect even more. And when I left your house, I pulled out a poem, which is really one of my favorites, and certainly, judging from what you all said, it really contains Joel's last message to all of you whom he loves so well. And to Jacob and Jonathan, I know you're young enough not to listen to anyone for more than 2 minutes, but I want you to hear the last 4 lines of the poem. I'll tell you when you have to pay attention. When I die, if you need to weep, cry for someone walking the streets beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around others and give to them what you need to give to me. You can love me most by sharing your joys, multiplying your good deeds. You can love me most by letting me live in your eyes and not in your mind. And when you say Kaddish for me, remember what our Torah teaches. This is it. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Shalom la'afro l'nafsho. May peace, God's own sweet peace, ever be with his soul. May God grant each of you who mourn so deeply this day a time of quiet healing. Amen. Oh, God, help it. Well, before I do that, the family's asked me to announce that they will be returning to the home of Stephen and Janet Braverman, 7394 Greenport, I believe it's in here, Greenport Cove in the Valencia Point development in Boynton Beach. Well, they'll be welcoming those who wish to join them from 4 to 7 p.m. this afternoon, 4 to 7. Oh God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, that the sorrow of loss is but the measure of love that is stronger than death. Even though we cry in the bereavement of our hearts, may we be as children who know that their parent is near and who cling unafraid to the trusted hand. In this spirit, O thou who art the master of our destinies, do we commit all that is precious to us into thy keeping. As we rise, those of us who can, please rise. As we repeat the words hallowed by generations of our people, as we share together in words of Kaddish, the words are found in transliteration in the middle of your prayer pamphlets which you were handed as you entered the chapel. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, bi'alama devrach eretei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayachon v'meachon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, b'agala uzman kariv v'mru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mivarach le'olam omer maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kodashah brichu, le'elam min kol b'yachata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, damiran b'yama v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort those who bereaved here among us. El malei rachamim sholchem b'mramim, amsei menucha nachona tacha confess shechina, lenishmat Yoel bat Yechiel ve'eta shehalach li'olamo, bala rachamim yitzroa b'tzroa hachayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachlato, b'noch b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar amen. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest unto the soul of Joel Braverman, who has departed from this world. Lord of mercy, bring him into thy presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou his possession, and may his repose be everlasting shalom, everlasting peace. Amen.